second if you don't mind.
Okay, and I'm not, I don't know if it's really a question, but can you just your thoughts on, mental health? There's so many, I find it's so many aspects to do with homeless, and not just here, but nationwide. And I always feel like so many cities, they just put Band-Aids on it because it's such a huge topic. Or it's just so big, it's like, where do you start? So when you speaking about like housing and the affordability, I mean, just things that I've read, there's that sometimes some people just don't want to even be in a stable housing environment. And I don't know percentages, if it's like 10% that want or don't want, but just anything to do with the mental health as well as immigration. I mean, there's so many different types of homelessness, I guess. So what sort of policies or forward thinking might there be for those different types, or I don't know if you want to call them populations?
So I appreciate that question, and yes, this is an aspect of being unhoused. However, I think it's a very, very, very small percentage of the people who are unhoused who actually don't want to be housed. The other part that I think is important for us to consider is there are plenty of people who have very severe mental health issues who are housed, and the reason why they're housed is maybe they have generational wealth, and or people in their family can take care of them, and so there's also a chicken and egg question here, right? Maybe you're going through a slight crisis, and because of your slight crisis, you have lost your housing, and then you're trying to keep warm on the streets, and somebody you meet on the streets is like, hey, if you take this substance, the cold doesn't hurt as much, and then you have a drug problem because you were in a crisis that led you to not have housing, and it snowballs from there. And so I believe the problem is a housing first problem. If people do not have housing, of course the existing mental health problems that they have compound. Does that mean that I think we don't need wraparound services? Of course not. We do need wraparound services, and there are a few populations who have quite severe mental health issues, and that does lead them to be in the cycle of being unhoused. However, I think that the chicken and egg issue here is important for us to consider. How much not having a home compounds your existing mental health issues is critical in that conversation. And so I support housing everybody. I support giving the people who have these severe mental health issues treatment, because we can afford it, and because doing so is cheaper than locking them up over and over again. And we know that.
John, did you want to weigh in?
I don't think you want to hear what I want to say,
We definitely want to hear it.
but I'll try. Although I'm pretty sure you don't want to hear what I want to say. I disagree. If you really want to solve complex human behavior, just simply look at a website, the Center for Prevention of Violence, Dale Elliott, CU, also associated with University of Washington, I believe. We are really complex people. We have all sorts of issues. The only place I disagree is housing first. No, housing is really important. I agree. But we've got to look at each individual as an individual. Maybe they do need religion. Maybe they do need mental health treatment. Maybe they do need to get off drugs. Maybe they do need a stable mentor relationship. Maybe they need to go back to, maybe they need self-confidence. I mean, a multitude, everything that we have in our lives, they need. And so Dale Elliott's proposition is very simple. Put as many protective factors around every human being we can. And that is family, religion, friends, education, wealth, all that stuff. And try to avoid as many risk factors as we can. Drugs, sex, violence. I mean, there's all sorts of crap out there that is pulling us in bad directions. We are humans with all our strengths and weaknesses and virtues and vices. Let's look at each individual we talk with and find out what they need. And try our damnedest as a society to provide them with that. And yes, some of it's family, some of it's religion, some of it's all sorts of, it's not just housing. Housing's important. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is what I prefer rather than this circle, yeah, it's the base level. It's hard to love your neighbor when you're starving. I get it. Provide safety and security and shelter for them first. Let's do that. But it's one among many things we need. Most of us need something more important, and that's acceptance and love and relationships, and for some of us, God. Not me. Yeah, kind of me, but not necessarily the way you think of.
Yeah, and I would just argue, John, I was gonna disagree with you, that if we haven't done that for our most vulnerable children at those early developmental stages, because we haven't been willing to make the budget priorities, then getting to do that for adults later is
Tough stuff.
yeah, for sure. Okay, other comments and right now.
Forgive me if I start tearing up. This is very hard for me. I am afraid to say how I feel because I have been attacked for how I feel about certain subjects. Coming up to the homeless, just piggybacking here, because it can be that I'm talking about anything, but I would like, and maybe if this is inappropriate, please just stop me. I would like to know how many people in this room think that the private section of our capitalistic society provides enough funding, and how many people in this room feel like the government provides enough funding for these problematic areas in our life. Now, you talk about this one website, and we just surround these people with what they need on a one-to-one basis. Who is they? Who is they, and how much money do they give to this person on a one-to-one basis to make them feel loved and give them housing and give them enough time so that their children are safe? And I think that if we can't I feel like if we don't get back to the bottom of our society doing for others on a societal level, it cannot be, in my opinion, in my view of life, as private people, we don't have enough. We need the government to be giving us enough safety. And if all of that sounded stupid, I'm sorry. It seems to me that that is the problem here. We are a capitalistic society, and if we're not making money, then we are not achieving. And there are so many people not making money that are trying to get by, and we are all on different levels. I just wonder, how do we get to that place? Does the government come in? Because a lot of conservative thinking is that, no, less tax, because I don't need to pay for the schools. My kids aren't in schools. No, less tax, because those mothers who are raising their children on their own don't need my help. But the government is there for that. That's what created our society long ago. And if we don't give money to that society to create a larger pool of happiness, how do we get there? How do we get there? Nope, I'm gonna stop.
It's okay. I can't see your name tag, I'm sorry.
I wrote it really big too.
Darcy.
I like
Darcy, I want to thank you for being nervous about sharing your feelings and still sharing them anyway. And I want to be able to make sure that I understand your comment and question, because I think it's an important one. I understand you saying that we all have a responsibility to all of us. Is that correct? You feel like we all have a responsibility to the greater community?
I do, but not, I think individuals have a greater responsibility to be kind to one another, to accept one another for their strengths as well as their weaknesses, to try to talk, but I feel like those larger problems, I have no control over that.
So
The
you-
government or private groups have control over that.
Mhm. And you wanna see the government role, I'm just summarizing here, because I think it's an important conversation, I know everybody'd like to weigh in on this, I think it's a good one to weigh in on. What is the role of government? Is the role of government then to provide some of those safety nets, that when people do fall through, you know, whether it's because their crisis or mental health, or because our unemployment is too low, I mean, not because of our minimum wage is too low, whatever the reason, is it the role of government then to provide some of those safety nets so that the most vulnerable populations don't fall through the cracks? And so let me ask you, to the group, how many people think that that should be a role of government? Okay, how many people feel like the role of government simply should be collect taxes and make sure that we have roads and a military, and not in the business of providing for the least, those with the least among us? Okay, is that helpful? To answer your question, you're not alone. You're not alone. And I think where we get into the weeds is how much, who decides, you know, to what extent, right? And so let's open that up and have some more conversation about that. Do you mind if I let the group respond and then I'll come back to you? Okay.
I want to get in before the policy wonk gives us the real answer. I read a study, 10 to 15 years ago. It was really interesting, and I had nothing to back up what the study was, but it was really interesting that it said that they did this study of people, and they showed them things, they asked them questions, and then later on asked what their political affiliation was. And the interesting part to me was that the people that leaned the most liberal had more empathy for others than anyone else. And the people that leaned the most conservative had the most concern about their own safety, their family safety and security. And I'm not gonna say it was a smooth transition all the way through, but the summary of the result was that this is kind of us and them, is us and them can be a million different things, but it's helping others versus, I look out for me first. And so I've kind of tried to use that as the years go by, and it seems like, those are the policy decisions. I mean, people may know politics better than me, but being 63, I've seen the years where I thought it was a good thing that we switched back between more liberal and more conservative administrations, because it kept, sometimes we would go too far one way or another. And so we're just at this point now where it feels like a forever tip, or will it never tip? And that's why I'm so concerned. If I could pay more taxes and everyone else pay more taxes and we could house everybody, I would love that. I would increase my amount and do that. It's just, as we can see, my vote didn't make the difference this year. And, will it ever? I don't know. But I don't lose hope. I just know that there are people that have different priorities. And we'll never get 100% of people to agree with, we need to house everyone that doesn't have a house. And we're not fighting them, we just want our side to be strong enough to have a majority to make inroads in that area. And then there'll be a year or multiple years where it won't. It's gonna be Sisyphus, right? Pushing the boulder up the hill forever. If we let go, it will roll backwards. At least that's how I see this.
I think it's kind of funny to me, because like as a journalist, I always get you know, when people wanna insult me, you're biased, you're the left media, the liberal media, and ironically, I'm down the middle a lot, cause I see both sides, and this is an issue where I can like clearly see both sides. Do we have a lot of affordable housing in Denver? We do. Do we have enough? We don't. Do we have a lot of shelters in Denver? We do. Do we have enough? We don't. But I think what the average person doesn't realize, okay, you see the homeless encampments, right? You think, why don't they just go to a shelter? Shelters have a lot of rules that we don't talk about. If you have a dog, you can't have a dog. If you're married to somebody, you can't stay. In a lot of shelters, you can't stay in the same room as them. If you get into one of those tiny home villages, right? We see a lot of news on that. You have rules for drug use. So if you have a drug problem and you finally get stable housing, I don't think it's a one strike you're out rule, but it's probably 2 strikes you're out. A lot of shelters, affordable housing have those rules. And so, and we don't have enough tiny home villages, because if a tiny home village is coming to a certain community, they are going to vote against that tiny home village because they don't want the village near their property. So city council approves the budget and the neighborhood rejects it. If there is an opportunity to build more affordable housing, everybody says, yeah, more affordable housing, and then you learn that great affordable housing plan, only 20% of that affordable housing community would be affordable. Okay, well now we have another affordable housing community that's gonna come, and the majority of the affordable housing community will be affordable housing, but it's actually you have to make, 40% of the median income. Like, there are all these caveats. There's so many things that I think a lot of people don't realize. So I feel both ways. Have we done a lot? Yes. Could we do more? Yes. Have we done enough? Will we ever be able to do enough? I think everybody would, love a little help. I think everybody would also not like to see their neighbor suffering in the street. But I also think that not everybody understands why. I do think that there is a mental health component. I just think it's really, really hard to utilize some of the resources that are out there. Like, I know Aurora is building a very big shelter for people experiencing homelessness, but it's job first. So you have to have a job to live in the shelter, but how can you get a job if you don't have a house? And how can you even get a job interview if you don't have anywhere to shower? So you kind of see what I'm saying? It's like, I think Colorado as a whole is really working on the issues, but when you do get into the weeds, there are so many little roadblocks that actually block us from utilizing the resources that are there, the tax dollars that we have given.
And gentlemen, I see both of you wanting to go, so how do you negotiate that between yourselves? It'll be a little power struggle. I'll observe.
Okay, so, I wanna go back to the central point here and, recognize that poverty as we know it in America is completely a policy choice. The Pentagon's budget last year was $950 billion. Every year, and these news articles fly completely under the radar. But every year there will be a news article that says the Pentagon lost $86 billion. And they don't know where it went at all. It's completely unaccounted for. The National Low Income Housing Coalition, these are national experts on housing and homelessness, estimate that ending homelessness in this country would cost $50 billion a year. That is change in the cushions of the couch of the Pentagon. And I want to acknowledge a good president, Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower. In his farewell address, he warned of the military-industrial complex. In that speech, he said, every gun that is made, every warship that is launched, every rocket that is fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger, from those who are not fed, from those who are cold, and those who are not clothed. The world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, and the hopes of its children. The average taxpayer, what all of this means is the average taxpayer pays more than $1,000 a year just to weapons contractors, just to Raytheon, to Northrop Grumman, to Lockheed Martin. These are private companies whose CEOs make hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And the average taxpayer then in turn spends about $250 a year on K through 12 education and less than $3 a year on housing people. Do I think we need a robust defense in the United States of America? Of course. But we spend 10 times what China spends. And there are plenty of articles about how China's spending is actually more efficient than ours. I believe that China's spending is more efficient than ours because they have not fallen for the military-industrial complex. We have a private industry that is fully dependent on government money. The F-35 jet, which we've spent more than $1 trillion on, sucks. It's not a good piece of equipment. We could have ended homelessness instead of investing in that. And these are policy choices made by politicians who are funded by donations from these companies. All of this comes down to money in politics. And that's why I think Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump, because she did not make the election about these issues, because she was dependent on millionaires and billionaires donating to her campaign. I am a Democrat. I knocked on doors for every presidential candidate on the Democratic side since I've been old enough to do so. And man, this time around, I did not hear the Democrats talking about economic justice. We wheeled out Liz Cheney and talked about democracy when people don't believe in democracy because members of Congress are corporate oligarchs supported like NASCAR drivers by Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. And that is what I think is the central issue here. We can afford it. We're not affording it because politicians are bought and sold by their corporate donors.
One, I found some place where we can totally agree, I hope. Please, 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 it is the highest protected speech in America. U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that. There's a chance they may change it. But the highest protected speech in America is political speech. Please, 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 it's the only profession written into the Constitution. Protect and honor the fourth estate, media. Do we agree or not?
Sure.
I mean, that's something we should rally behind. And I know the media has been under attack for a long time now, 9 years. Please stop that. Wait, you aren't, my guess is, you aren't. But please encourage your neighbors to stop attacking the fourth estate. Honor somebody who has a strong opinion, thank you, and people that are just reporting the news. Second, I've been involved in public policy for over 40 years, I think 45 years now. I've run for office 7 times, I've won 4 times. Yes, I was probably your county commissioner if you've lived here. If you live in Centennial, yes, I'm one of the 5 founders. I've been doing this a long time. I love grassroots politics. I beg you, sorry to disagree.
Absolutely.
Not on your overall philosophy, but sorry to disagree on this point. It wasn't until about 35 years ago, no, about 35 years in, about 10 years ago, that a friend finally said, John, I finally get it. I've listened to you a long time, I finally get it. Democrats, and this is not me, but it resonated with me. Democrats care about people they've never met, never will. It's just the thought of somebody in poverty or in crisis, and they just have empathy for it, and they want to solve that problem, and they're going to pay their taxes and write laws about it and solve a problem for some stranger. Well, that's actually kind of cool. I don't have a problem with that. He goes, but conservatives, me, care about somebody they've met, somebody they've looked in their eyes, somebody who's in their church, somebody who's in their neighborhood, somebody who's an employee, somebody who's somehow associated with. They've got to know it, they've got to feel, they've got to touch the person they care about. Is that kind of cool? Yeah. I'm not saying Democrats are wrong, I think that's nice, but I'm saying that it's probably wrong to stereotype 50% of the country is not caring about people. I think they care about people in a different way. And I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just asking you to consider that people care about people in different ways. That's all I'm asking for. Finally, I ask you to increase the budget, military defense budget. I'm seriously, by 10% or 20% or necessary 50%, and send it all to Ukraine and fight Russia. If we look at the entire history of the world, sorry to be melodramatic on this, If we look at the history of humanity, it's all about power. You don't think this is about money and power? It's all about power. Fight it, please. Fight for individual freedom and liberty and the ability to people just live their lives. And those people, poor people in Ukraine, are just going to get killed. They are getting killed. They're getting slaughtered. And they will continue to do so. We should have put groups on, and I put this on Facebook, we should have put troops on the ground, not just Americans, United Nations, NATO troops on the ground the first day they invaded. And maybe half the world's GDP, European Union, and half the world's GDP, America, 50% of the world's wealth could have stopped a brutal dictatorial. We want to talk freedom? We want to talk caring for poor people? Let's talk about the free exchange of goods and services, not allowing an autocracy to destroy the world. Look at any history book in the world. There are brutal, evil, mean people that are just willing to take your stuff and your people and your body, and there's got to be people that stand up for freedom, and that historically has been America.
I just want
Not even a applause for that? Thank you,
I just want
Susan.
to comment on one thing that you said, John, because you said conservatives care about like people they know that they look in the eye. As a person who's a part of a marginalized group,
I agree.
I need you to care about me without knowing me, because we would still be enslaved if people who didn't know enslaved people didn't fight for them. We would still be fighting for civil rights if it hadn't been for allies who didn't know us to fight for civil rights. So marginalized communities depend on people who don't know us, who don't know our struggle, who don't look like us, to care about us.
Disagree, but touche. Good point.
Why do you disagree?
Because that's not, all sorts of human beings have philosophy. Slavery is so damn wrong. Come on, folks. You didn't have to know slaves directly to realize slavery in the North was horribly wrong. I love your point. I do. I don't mean to be melodramatic, but no, there are things we should stand up for. And the dignity of the human being, we should stand up for, and we don't have to know somebody was a slave to believe it is pure wrong.
Right, but you have to care enough to fight against it. Everybody in this country knows right from wrong,
Thank you.
right? Everybody in this country knows poverty is wrong. But you have to care enough to fight for the person who's living in a tent that you don't know.